With each passing day, I'm recognizing how bullying is everywhere: emotional, verbal, physical, spiritual, and on the whole, most of us are seeing only a tiny portion of it. Tiny. It's so common that we don't see it as out of the ordinary, so it's accepted as normal, and then we don't see it at all. That's an alarming deception, when that which is common becomes normal and then not even a source of concern. But kids who are bullied, an epidemic in this country, have a much higher incidence of depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, often for life. These kids who are bullied carry it with them everywhere. And then we worry about treating depression, anxiety, and self-esteem with therapy, drugs, government programs without addressing one of the most prominent causes, maybe the cause, and certainly a known cause. Collectively, we're not all that bright, would you say? That we keep treating it and not seeing the cause? Bullying is any behavior that leads to a person feeling motivated by fear to comply with the desires of the bully, whether intended or not. And that is a horrible thing. This is a great time to hit like, subscribe, make comments, hit the bell on YouTube, and I'll keep teaching you these principles and sending them to you. Principles that really work when we or our children encounter bullies. What every child on earth needs most is to feel unconditionally loved, which causes them to feel worthwhile and happy. When a child allows bullying, they feel small and worthless. They can't feel loved. They can't be happy. Bullying can be seen in a mocking tone, a persistent request, which is really not one, a criticism, even when the bully doesn't realize that he's being intimidating. Bullying can be present in the giving of advice by the tone, a command, teasing, or even an insistent suggestion. It's often so hidden to observers, to the bully, and to the object of the bullying. Let's look at one example. A mother called to tell me that she had taken her 3-year-old son, Jacob, to visit a 4-year-old cousin. Mom immediately identified the aggressive tone of the cousin because Mom was paying attention. So she watched the interaction between the two boys. They were just making bubbles, using some variation on the usual theme, of dipping a plastic circular tip or some other frame into soap and then making bubbles by blowing or moving it in the air. As Jacob was learning the process for himself, the cousin kept intruding with comments like, "No, not like that," or "You're doing it wrong," or "Let me show you how." Heard that before, those tones? The cousin obviously failed to understand that Jacob was not interested in blowing 4-year-old cousin bubbles. No, he wanted to create Jacob bubbles, at which he was succeeding perfectly. Nor had Jacob asked for help. He was just having Jacob fun. These are pretty big concepts to get across. Mom knew that something was wrong with this picture. She could see that Jacob was beginning to feel stressed and unhappy. Why? Because she was paying attention again. She was listening. She called him over and said, "Remember that Mommy loves you." That's almost never a bad thing to say to a child, but in this case, Jacob needed more practical and immediate help. Mom said to me, quote, "Maybe when we got home, I should have explained to Jacob that the other boy was just empty," end quote. And I said, okay, but that's way too theoretical for a 3-year-old kid. And if you say it hours after the event, he won't even remember how he felt at the time. He needed practical help from you right then while the event was happening. Mom said, "I need help." First, the older child was bullying Jacob. She said, "No way, bullying?" When somebody uses fear and intimidation to get what they want, that's bullying. Intimidation from a 4-year-old? Yeah, the cousin was older and bigger. That's a huge intimidation factor. And he was playing in his own house, which makes him a kind of boss. More intimidation. "Really?" she said. Really. In his defense, the cousin was not conscious of all this. He wasn't a malicious little 4-year-old. But I promise you that he felt the power he was getting out of it, even if he couldn't name it. She said, hard to believe. Simple. Would the 4-year-old have ordered me around if I were blowing bubbles? Oh, she said, okay, I think I get it better now. Also, the repetition. If the cousin had offered his help just once, it might have been real help. But he made his comments over and over, and they became more insistent, even aggressive. Yes? Yeah, that's true. And all that intimidation wasn't intended to teach Jacob anything. It was to control Jacob using fear. And the cousin could see the fear on Jacob's face, even though he couldn't name it. So he poured on additional intimidation. Again, unaware, but it still happened. And it frustrated your kid. You could see that. He became afraid and didn't know what to do. I hadn't thought of all that, she said. Of course not. Bullying happens so often that we don't notice it anymore. So first we have to learn to recognize it, and then we have to teach our kids how to respond to it. If we don't do that, we leave our kids defenseless. They will get bullied in the world. It's unavoidable. And if we don't teach them how to spot it and make wise choices, they'll end up feeling small and less worthwhile. We can't afford to do that with our kids. Can't afford to do that to them. Mom said, well, I told him I loved him. Yes, you did. And that was great. It was sweet. But he needed way more than that. Well, like what? I'll tell you what I might have done and said in that situation with your son. I'll play your role. Do not hear me telling you what you should have done. Not even what you should do in the future. I'm just showing you options you wouldn't have thought of, which will give you more choices and confidence for the future. Okay, she said. I would move closer to Jacob and say, you can choose to blow bubbles your way. That's what the other kid there. You can choose to do it your way. You don't have to do it anybody else's way. Mom said, well, what if the other kid keeps commenting? Oh, he might, probably will. Then again, I would step in and say, Jacob, you can tell your cousin that you don't like it when he bosses you around. And I would say that likely with me standing right there. And if I were right there, it's likely Jacob would say that to his cousin. I also told Mom some more generalized responses that Jacob could use any time he sensed bullying and that we can all use. For example, it doesn't help to fight bullies. No, the idea is to teach children how to be themselves and be confident in that. All bullies feel a lack of unconditional love. They feel unloved, alone, and lost. They hate those feelings, and bullying gives them a sense of power that briefly decreases those negative feelings. Bullies pick on kids they perceive as weak because those kids are easier to intimidate. Bullies pick on the weak, I say for the second and third time. The bullied child is most successful when he removes the bait, his weakness. That's what the bully's looking for. Removes the bait from the bully. How? By being strong. That doesn't mean fighting. Doesn't mean fight back. So what would that look like to be strong? It's really simple, and it's easy to remember. Just 3 steps. We're going to eliminate bullying today from the world. Not likely, but we're going to start. First, your child states clearly and firmly, I don't like it when you do that, whatever it is. Hit me, push me, tell me to blow bubbles. No anger, because that only provokes a bully. No fear, which encourages the bully. No anger, no fear. Second, if the bullying continues, likely actually, your child simply repeats exactly those same words. No change. No change in the words. They only have to remember one thing. I don't like that. When you do that. Firmly, no anger. 3, if the bullying keeps going, 1, 2 times he says it, the third time, your child says, if you keep doing that, I will get help. And he can name what kind of help. Then he gets a teacher or a parent to help him. Yes, I know. People are going to call that ratting the other kid out or whatever word, or that it's weak. What's the other word I'm looking for? Tattling. But it's not. It's just an acknowledgement that the situation is beyond his abilities. We can talk about bullying all day, and still the most powerful tool in your arsenal is to love your child unconditionally. A child armed with that feeling becomes confident, and bullies tend to avoid confident children. They don't pick on this. The wolf doesn't pick on the strong bull. He picks on the straggler, the one that's weak, diseased, crippled. Learn how to find this real love for your kids, for you. Learn how to share it with your children, as well as how to arm them against bullying and how to prevent the pain that leads to anxiety, depression, phone addiction, and all the other problems of childhood. Go to realloveparents.com and find all those answers.